Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Susan Harrow. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted. I'm so grateful to have you here this wonderful evening. How are you?
I'm so happy to be here too. And we were just talking about our love of birds, which is such a wonderful thing to have in our lives, especially now. Anything that can make us happier, I think, makes us a better podcast guest.
Yes, and a podcaster if you're out there doing that for your business. We're going to talk on the wonderful topic of podcasting and broadcasting and how to use media and podcasting to grow your business. A lot of people are like, oh, how do I get out there and brand using podcasts, either as starting my own perhaps, or maybe going on other people's podcasts. So what do they have to know to really do that effectively as a tool to grow their business, as a marketing tool? Now, before we go there, I'd love for you to share a little backstory for everyone. Like, how did you come to where you are today? You've been a media trainer, marketing strategist, author. What brought you to the wonderful world of podcasting and all that jazz?
Yeah, so I started off as a publicist, and what I found, so that's booking people on the media. And in those days, in the olden days, Christina, it was mostly by phone, and so the internet was new. And so, blast emails were revolutionary at that time. So what I found was I worked mainly with artists, authors, and entrepreneurs at that time. And I've really grown my business now to be more, it's always been social entrepreneurs, people who are doing something that are socially conscious, that are making a difference in the world. Before that was even a word, but I was always interested in that. And that's the kind of business that I've always had. It's all about beauty. And it's also about self-expression and people doing great things without wanting to be famous. And then what I found was that I could book people on Oprah, on Larry King Live, and, New York Times, you name it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what would happen would be a great big nothing. And then I started they came to me and said, well, Susan, nothing happened. I didn't sell my book. Nothing happened with my business. I got 100 bum phone calls and nothing turned into business. So I started looking at a couple of things. Number one, what they were saying, who they were being, their presence, who they were being, what they were saying, and how it related to their audience, what the media needs today, but what their audience needs, and how closely that was connected. And I started media training them, and we saw a dramatic change in getting the kind of business you want. Because the one client who came to me and said, I got 100 phone calls. Yeah. And I'm like, well, how much of that turned into business? And she said, 2. And I said, that's a huge waste of your time, to have 100 calls and only 2. So you're not saying the right things to drive the right kind of people to you, whether it's clients, customers, sales, business opportunities, partnerships, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So that's when we started being like super intentional about those kinds of things. And I loved the media training so much that I moved from the publicity specifically into the media training. And then the marketing part, which was setting up your system. So sometimes like a woman just called me the other day, and she's beautiful and she's brilliant, and her TED Talk has over 2 million views already. But her website is not set up for the kind of business that she's moving into, which is speaking, which is selling her products. And so I said, well, we should not start to do media, to do the actual media placements until I media train you, so you have your messaging down and you have your system set up to move people through. So when they're ready to buy, they may not be ready to buy now, but whatever level that they want to engage in, you have engaged them and you have a way to reconnect with them until they're ready. Because now it takes, Christina, it used to be 7 times. Now it's up to 20 touches because the internet is so noisy. Yeah, before people actually buy, because we've got so much choice and it's so blah, 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 right?
Yeah, all over the place. And I find word of mouth is probably still one of the best ways to get seen and heard, but getting that positive feedback. Now, you mentioned something very important. Someone can have a TED Talk like your client that has millions of views, but now, this is something interesting. I remember someone saying to me many years ago, he did video work for corporations, and he would say, people would come to him and say, why do I have to pay you? I could just turn on my iPhone and record a video and put it on my business page. And he said, but will that speak to what your business is presenting and the messaging you want to get out there? And will it look professional? Because as you're saying, your client, she might not even have the capacity in her website to meet the people who are going to stream in, but also does her messaging and how should you say it? The website, does it really speak to what you can present professionally? Because sometimes you're phenomenally professional, but when you go to your website or other places, it doesn't speak to what you can really give to your market.
No, and that's so important. That's so important. A friend of mine is a journalist, and she had done an article. It was in Forbes or Inc. And she had quoted this guy, and they were really happy with it, and they were going to run with the story, but they went to his website and they nixed it, because his website was not up to the quality of what someone would be reading in Forbes, so it would reflect back on them. Yeah. So yes, you do need to have a professional looking website that is in alignment with your values, your message, your brand, and your mission. So all of those things need to be aligned. Everything you do, say, are, and think, from your words to your website, need to speak and feel like you, right? And we don't want to see this video of you or a photo of you where you're all glammed up, and then we see you and you're a schlub.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes, exactly. And they've gotten one video or whatever, and then we meet you. We want all of that to be consistent through all social channels.
Yeah. And let's also talk about your messaging, your story, because I had heard many years ago, it's really not facts that sell, it's stories. So people connect to stories, they'll connect to you and feel you as a viable human being that they can connect with through your story, not so much through the facts. Oh, I've sold and helped XYZ amount of people. They're like, that's nice. That's nice. I don't feel that connection to you. So how does someone get in touch with what their story is?
Yeah, I love that you use the word get in touch, because I think you do need to be in touch with your stories and what's most important to you. And the first one is your story of origin, why you do what you do, because everybody's going to ask you why you do that. Why'd you write your book? Why'd you start your business? Why do you do what you do? And you want to have a story of origin. And sometimes there's a number of them. So I actually created a PDF with the 5 main stories that's available to your people. If I should give the website. So it's
go for it.
fearsecrets.com/SIGPOD, SIGPOD, like signature story podcast, SIGPOD. And you can do it in 5 minutes. So you can create now there's a huge, tremendous variety of stories of origin, but these are 5 main ones, and they're fill in the blank template. So you can do it really quickly, lickety split, and then you can modify it, but you can everybody can have theirs in 5 minutes. That's the most important story. So one of my origin stories, and you should probably have a number of them. So I have probably 5 origin stories, so I told you like this, that was sort of a short version of one that you asked me in the beginning, but it's not like my whole history, right? Like, so another story might be about, when I was on a playground, when I was in junior high, I was a part of 3 different groups. I was part of the jocks, I was a part of the popular kids, and I was a part of the artists. So I was really in 3 different sort of groups, very different. And so my artist friends were always getting beat up, right? And they were the more intellectual or the quirky ones. And one day I saw someone beating up one of my dear friends, boom, 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 pounding them into the pavement, and with this big crowd around. And one of my values even then was like protecting the weak, the people who couldn't speak for themselves. So I ran over to him, yanked the bully off, and screamed at everybody, what are you looking at? Get out of here. And that really is part of what I do today, is protecting the beauty and the people who have maybe not such a loud voice, some of the introverts and the quirky people, and the people who are, maybe they were the awkward, nerdy ones then, but now they're the brilliant innovators now, to give those people a voice out in publicity so they can express their own offer and whatever it is that they have to give to the world. So that would be an example of a story of an origin.
That's awesome. And, it's interesting. I taught many years ago to a friend, and she was starting her health business. And she said, well, I want to wait until I have get started. I have a good enough story or reason to help people. She just didn't feel confident in herself. And I was thinking, there's no better time than getting started today. We were talking right at the start of our conversation that some people will look at Oprah or some of those medias as, oh, those are for other people who are more accomplished and better. And instead of looking at it from that perspective, everyone has gifts and talents and skills today. It's really, how can you better serve that podcast you're thinking of going on, that media, that spot? What gifts or knowledge or wisdom can I pass on to their audience and give to them? Not about what can I promote.
Oh, I think that's so true to think about. I mean, if you think about like the question, what is mine to give with the gifts that I have, the gifts and the magic that I have now? And none of us feel ready ever. I mean, I've been doing podcasting and media for years. I still get nervous. I still got nervous even before this. That's just the way. And then, you can turn that into excitement. You can say whatever it is. It's still nervousness. It's still nervousness. And so what? I mean, that's going to accompany me. I'm not trying to get rid of it. It's like, I can practice my own calming exercises, which I do before a podcast, but that doesn't necessarily take away all of the nervousness either. And I don't know what you were going to ask, or things like that. So I'm like, well, am I, and I'm an over preparer, but I also love the spontaneous. So I'm like, well, part of me wants to be completely spontaneous and part of me wants to be completely 100% prepared. Yeah. And when I work with my clients, we do a lot of role play because, and another podcaster asked me, can I do it in my mind? No, you have to do it in the real situation, like in the actual situation to get the feel of it in your body, because, so for example, with one of my clients, she's a super highly skilled speaker. And we were doing some media training, and I said, let's just do one. And also, she's a specialist in DEI, so she's worked with people of all ages and all cultures, and so highly experienced. So I was playing the sort of aggressive male, where I thought she might get a podcast or a radio or some kind of interview that was a little more intense and a little more aggressive. And she started copying an attitude. And I said, yeah. And I said, hey, so what's going on? So that was one of her triggers. She goes, I didn't even think of you, Susan, as you anymore. I thought of you as an a-hole white man. Oh. And so she said, that's something that I really need to look at. So we needed to role play that again and again, which is actually something that comes out of therapy, which is called, what is it called? Oh gosh, now I forgot, but it's the kind of therapy where you continually exposure therapy, where you continually expose the person. It's a little bit different than behavioral modification. You expose the person over and over again to that until it lessens the trigger, until they get used to it. So the kind of thing that happens in your gut, or the sneer or the aggression or whatever way you react, if you attack back, that's when we can go, okay, well, that was your first response, and let's see if we can try it another way. And we role play that until it's not so triggering. And then you do the work on your own too, because we're all triggered by something, that's just the nature of us being, being who we are. Like my BFF and I were talking the other day, he came to town. He's a judge and he's been a public defender and a commissioner, and he was in a role play situation and he was triggered in front of all of his peers. Right. And we were talking about this over dinner. He's like, this is what happened. And oh my God. And I was so present and so authentic. People really appreciated, but he said, I realized that this was one of my triggers when people act like this. And he said, and that's something that I need to work on. So it's part of that self-realization for you to enact that. So when you are in a media situation or a podcast, or somebody asks you too personal of a question or aggressive a question, you can handle it.
Oh, that is so phenomenal. I remember many years ago, and this was a retreat. We went on a psychological kind of spiritual retreat, and everyone has their things they need to work on. And the guy running it said, well, he paired me up with someone who was very submissive and chill, and she wanted to get her voice, be confident, stand up for herself. And I have no problem with that. I am very loud. I'm out there. So he paired us up, and he said, okay, we're going to switch places. You're going to be her and she's going to be you. And so they gave us a skit, and right in the middle of it, I switched and got really aggressive. And she's like, And then she got really submissive, and he's like, stop, you're switching roles. And so it was really interesting when you mentioned that it's great doing this role playing, maybe with a friend of yours to get more comfortable if you don't have a media coach at the moment, just to see where you are and where you might be triggered, what you might need to be worked on, work out and on, and see what your personality type is. You know, as you said, everyone gets triggered by different things, and we all express things a little differently.
I think that's so true.
Yeah.
And that's so great. And what a wonderful experience that you had too. And that doesn't come from doing it in your head. It's from actually in the actual situation.
Yeah. Now, I'd love to go deeper into, someone will say, hey, how do I know when it's a good idea to maybe start a podcast for my business, or should I just do podcast guesting? I mean, what's the best thing for me and my business, and how do I even begin to figure that out?
Such a great question, because it's two completely different skills. Interviewing skills are not the same thing as talking skills or expressing skills. So I think one of the first questions to ask yourself is really, and I was actually speaking to a very robust business, $100 million business, and they had started a podcast. And I said, what's the purpose of your podcast? Because they said it's not getting traction. And I said, well, what do you want it to do for your business? And they didn't know. And I remember being kind of gobsmacked by that. And they had very little time to do it. They had a very busy business, and they didn't have much time to do it. And I said, well, I think that's the question that we need to answer first, is what do you want your results to be? Like, what's your big picture view of what you want to have happen? And then that will help determine. Yeah. So do you love interviewing people? Or do you want to have a podcast where it's just you talking? Are you a self, are you somebody who has so many ideas you can pop them up every week or twice a week? Some people do twice a week, right? So I think it's determining what you want for your business, what you love to do, what brings you joy, and then deciding how much time you want to invest in it, because both are very time intensive. And I don't know, you would probably know more, which is more time intensive, but I think it's your end is more time intensive than my end right now. But part of my job when I'm on a podcast is, after it's done, to have a whole promotional schedule too. So there's not just the showing up, but it's promoting you in the podcast. And we have a whole system for that, but most people don't. And they're like, oh my God, this is so much work. And I'm like, well, that's, you need to do your part too. It's a give and take.
Yeah.
So like asking yourself those questions, and then getting your messaging down, whether you're starting a podcast or not, you want to know, like, what is it important for me to convey to my audience, whether it's a one-time thing or an ongoing thing, and to start creating and crafting that messaging strategy that connects deeply to your clients, customers, and whoever that is out there that you want to connect with.
Yeah, those are really, really great points, because people have come on the show over the years. It's been almost 11 years we've been doing this, and sometimes I'm just really shocked when we'll do a wonderful interview. The guest was rocking, and I send them the video or audio, and I said, thank you so much. It was phenomenal. We'd love to have you back. And there's nothing. It's like, birds or crickets, and they don't promote it. And I'm like, you could use this not only to promote it on your network, but you could multi-purpose it. Like, you could take it apart and use pieces of it, get the transcript and take quotes out, or, there's just so many things you could do with several podcasts that you put out, maybe as a guest, that that you could use later on and make hundreds of pieces of content. So there's some missed opportunities there. And I liked what you said about your client who had been doing a podcast, probably as a means to think, okay, maybe if we just put this out here, we'll get clients, but without the structure behind it and the why, the audience just is not sure what you're trying to convey, and it doesn't come across. You don't really connect to your target audience.
No, and the other thing that I wanted to say that was really important, like my mentor I referred one of my mentors to a podcast, and she said, I just paid $7,500 and they got me on these podcasts, but I don't really think they were my audience. And I think that sometimes podcasters, the podcasting companies who are booked, they have a relationship with certain podcasts. So no matter what your business is, they book you on those specific podcasts. Yeah. And I said, and, even her who's super savvy, I was surprised about that because, the podcaster who booked me here, Anastasia Lipsky, we're very intentional about choosing the podcasts that I want to be on, that I listen, I audition you as much as you audition me. So I listen to your podcast, she passes it to me. I listen to you. I listen to a number of them and decide whether it's a yes for me. Is it the right audience for me? Are you right for me? Yeah. As a host, too, because there's some hosts where I just think the host isn't right for me and I'm not going to resonate with them. And so it's really a give and take. Like people go, well, it's not just about you being chosen, but it's also you doing the choosing and having the strategic plan. Like, is this your audience? And when you're with some podcast bookers, you don't get to choose that and it's willy-nilly. Yeah. You and I were chatting about that because it's so important to choose your audiences, to choose the podcast that if it's a health and wellness, that you are in, you want health and wellness podcasts only, most likely.
Exactly. And I mean, I heard many years ago from one of my past guests that she did a kind of big net kind of strategy where she went on 100 podcasts in 1 year. That was her goal. But it really didn't equate to sales, but she was like, I did this. I was like, all right, that's a great goal. But if you just want to go in 100 different places, you want a sports podcast and this podcast, and realize we all have we only have so much time in a day. So, like you were saying, just strategize, because you don't want to be at the end of the year going, did I just waste X amount of hours on podcasts where I can't serve them and they can't serve me?
I think that's super true. And, sometimes you're on podcasts that are maybe a little unusual or not exactly in your track. Like I'm going to be going on one where it's more about people who have been recovering from some sort of addiction. That's not exactly in my realm, but guess what? There's a lot of super smart, super high achievers who are either type A, they're ADD, they've got some sort of addiction, and that's a blessing and a curse. Yeah. So that's something that, I mean, I also open my mind and ask you to like expand your net too. Like, is there, too narrow of a focus isn't good, and neither is too broad, but to consider, well, what type of people? It may not be exactly who I expect, but I know that a lot of my clients are super high achievers, and probably most entrepreneurs are ADD in some way, shape, or form, right? And the innovators too, right? So I recognize that would be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could go on for many more hours because I know there's so much that you could give to our audience, but I don't want us to leave without them finding out how they can find out more about you, work with you as a media trainer or marketing strategist. How can they do that?
I love that. So you can go to prsecrets.com, like publicrelationssecrets.com. And I actually have a thought leaders program where we can do it in a day or do it over time or any way that you want to work together. I love one-to-one. And I've got a course called the Zen of Fame, Your Genius Gone Viral. So if you want to do it on your own, there's a little bit of me in there with a quick consult, but most of it's on your own. And then I have lots and lots of free things. I've got videos, special reports. They're all there. So you can get like really great training for free as well. And all of my podcasts are getting posted up there too. So if you love to have if you love podcasting, each one are different topics, so there's all of that on prsecrets.com. So thanks for asking.
You betcha. And there's so much the audience can learn. I'm just grateful you were able to come on out today and share your great wisdom and tips for our audience, because I know we get a lot of questions about how podcasting can serve my business, and you've given much food for thought today. So I thank you so much, Susan Harrow, for coming to Savvy Broadcasting.
Thank you so much.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.